The world awoke to breaking news. Chinese fishing captain Zheng Nianli was free, stepping out of a Nagasaki detention center after a tense standoff. It all began in the East China Sea, where a Chinese trawler clashed with a Japanese Coast Guard vessel. What started as a maritime dispute quickly escalated into a diplomatic showdown. Captain Zheng's release was a calculated diplomatic move. Images of Captain Zheng, silent and somber, spoke volumes. The world watched, wondering what this meant for Japan-China relations. The incident was a stark reminder of simmering tensions in East Asia. The East China Sea remains a flashpoint. This story is far from over. The confrontation unfolded on February 12, 2026, off the Goto Islands, waters claimed by Japan as its exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. Japan's Coast Guard patrols these waters, enforcing strict rules on foreign vessels. That morning, the patrol vessel Katori spotted the Chinese trawler Minjinyu 0428 allegedly fishing illegally. Warnings were issued in multiple languages, but the trawler refused to stop. The situation escalated as the Chinese vessel attempted to flee, making dangerous maneuvers. A minor collision occurred, transforming a routine inspection into a full-blown confrontation. For Japan, this was about sovereignty and control. Allowing illegal fishing undermines its authority. The Coast Guard's actions were a demonstration of Japan's resolve to protect its waters. But when a vessel resists, the risks multiply. The interception of the Minjinyu 0428 showed how quickly law enforcement can become an international flashpoint. This was not just about fish. It was about national pride and territorial claims. Every encounter in these contested waters carries the risk of escalation. The Coast Guard is the front line in a much larger struggle. The stakes are high, and every decision is scrutinized. The clash was a textbook example of how routine patrols can spiral out of control. Both sides saw the incident as a test of resolve. The world watched as the crisis unfolded. The outcome would set the tone for future encounters. The East China Sea remains a dangerous chessboard. One wrong move can trigger a crisis. After the collision, the Japanese Coast Guard boarded the Chinese trawler, a risky but decisive move. Armed officers secured the vessel and detained the crew, focusing on Captain Zheng Nianli. Zheng was arrested for obstructing public duties, accused of refusing inspection, and causing the collision. Captain Zheng faced the Japanese legal system alone. Chinese consular officials were notified and dispatched to assist. From Japan's perspective, this was a clear violation of law, not a political act. But in the context of Japan-China relations, nothing is ever simple. The incident highlighted the fine line between law enforcement and international crisis. The world watched as the case unfolded. Every action had consequences on the world stage. News of Captain Zheng's arrest hit Beijing like a shockwave. The Chinese government responded with fury, summoning Japan's ambassador and demanding Zheng's immediate release. China rejected Japan's EEZ claims, insisting the Coast Guard had no right to intercept its fishing boat. The demands were clear: release the captain, the crew, and the vessel, plus an apology and compensation. Beijing's rhetoric was uncompromising, warning of further action if demands weren't met. Chinese diplomats in Tokyo and Fukuoka worked non-stop, providing support to the detained crew and pressuring Japan. The incident was framed as Japanese aggression, with the fishermen portrayed as innocent victims. China argued its fishermen had traditional rights in these waters, predating modern maritime law. The narrative resonated with the Chinese public, tapping into historical grievances. The government's strong stance was aimed at both international and domestic audiences. The diplomatic pressure was intense, with both sides refusing to back down. The crisis became a test of national resolve. The world watched as tensions mounted. The incident became a rallying point for Chinese nationalism. The diplomatic standoff threatened to spiral out of control. The stakes were now higher than ever. This was not the first time a fishing boat incident had triggered a crisis between Japan and China. In 2010, a similar collision near the disputed Senkaku Diaoyu Islands led to a major diplomatic standoff. China retaliated by halting rare earth exports, shaking the global economy. Japan eventually released the Chinese captain, setting a precedent for crisis management under pressure. The 2010 incident showed China's willingness to use economic leverage for political goals. For Japan, it was a hard lesson in the costs of escalation. The current climate is even more tense, with Taiwan now a major flashpoint. Japan and the US have warned that a conflict over Taiwan would threaten regional stability, infuriating Beijing. This backdrop makes every maritime incident more dangerous. The fishing boat clash is a proxy for larger strategic competition. Every move is scrutinized, every statement analyzed. The risk of miscalculation is higher than ever. The unresolved disputes over territory and sovereignty fuel the cycle. A small incident at sea can quickly connect to much larger geopolitical fault lines. The lessons of 2010 loom large over every new crisis. The stakes have only grown. The next misstep could have even greater consequences. Japan's decision to release Captain Zheng after 72 hours was a calculated act of de-escalation. The arrest demonstrated Japan's resolve, but holding the captain risked a repeat of the 2010 crisis. China's playbook, diplomatic fury, economic pressure and nationalist protests was already in motion. With the global economy fragile, Japan could not afford a major rupture with its largest trading partner. The risks of escalation outweighed the benefits of a prolonged legal battle. The release was framed as a gesture of goodwill, not surrender. It allowed both sides to step back without losing face. The quick resolution prevented a major diplomatic rupture, but it also reinforced the precedent that intense pressure can force a release. This could embolden future confrontations in contested waters. Japan faces a delicate balancing act, enforcing its laws without triggering catastrophe. The crisis showed that communication channels remain open, but the underlying tensions are unresolved. De-escalation is a strategy, not a solution. The cycle is likely to repeat. The incident was reported in starkly different ways in Japan and China. Japanese media focused on law and order, portraying the Coast Guard as professional and the Chinese captain as reckless. The quick release was explained as a pragmatic move to avoid escalation. In China, state media framed the event as Japanese aggression against innocent fishermen. The EEZ claim was dismissed, and Captain Zheng was hailed as a hero. His arrest was called an outrage, his release a victory for Chinese resolve. Social media in China exploded with patriotic fervor. These competing narratives created separate realities for each country's public. The incident deepened mistrust and made compromise harder. Each side saw itself as the victim, the other as the aggressor. The media battle was as fierce as the diplomatic one. The story became a tool for nationalistic messaging. Finding common ground grew even more difficult. What began as routine law enforcement quickly became a diplomatic crisis. For the Japanese Coast Guard, the mission was simple: stop illegal fishing, enforce the law. But in contested waters, every action is political. The Coast Guard's presence asserts Japan's territorial claims. Every interception of a Chinese vessel is a political act, intended or not. On the Chinese side, fishing fleets often act as a maritime militia, encouraged to operate in disputed waters. Their presence challenges Japan's control and creates a new normal. When a Chinese trawler resists, it may be part of a broader strategy. Every encounter risks escalation, forcing split-second decisions with global consequences. Tactical choices on the water can trigger strategic crises. Diplomats and leaders are pulled into confrontations they'd rather avoid. The line between law enforcement and geopolitics is razor thin. The stakes are far higher than a single arrest. Patrols in these waters are never just routine. Captain Zheng's release brought relief, but the core issues remain unresolved. The East China Sea is still a flashpoint of competing claims and deep-seated rivalry. Incidents like this are symptoms of a larger geopolitical struggle. The risk of future clashes remains high. The next incident could escalate further with more serious consequences. The fundamental dispute over sovereignty and maritime rights persists. Fishing boats and Coast Guard vessels are pawns in a much larger game. Crisis management mechanisms exist, but they are strained. Both sides know escalation is dangerous, but trust is lacking. A more proactive approach is needed. Clear rules, better communication, and mutual restraint. The peace in East Asia is precarious, dependent on the judgment of captains and leaders alike. The Minjinyu 0428 incident is a warning of how easily sparks can ignite a fire. Dialogue and respect for international law are essential. The cost of conflict far outweighs any gain. The region's future stability depends on learning from these close calls.